where do you see Indian cinema headed in the current landscape? Is this a good time? Do you see this as a time for opportunity? Do you see these as challenging times? How to start off?
I believe that in the post-industrial, post-colonial era, the next battle is not for natural resources or land. It is actually about mind space.
Right.
Yeah. So the battle is for controlling, occupying mind space, and therefore all these digital platforms are actually giving you entertainment in your hip,
Right.
or in your pocket. Uh, and that is a major transformation from a big screen extravaganza that you were that excited us to cinema,
Right.
to your cinema being consumed
On a mobile phone.
on a
Yeah.
mobile phone, and that is where the maximum amount of consumption is happening. You know, so it's actually a completely qualitative paradigm shift that is
Right.
happening in the way you produce and consume audiovisual media per
Right.
se. I think the ice age is here now.
Right.
Seriously, we have been hearing about it for 20 years, but Ice Age is here. Information, communication, and entertainment are merging into something that has become an integral part of our lives. The kind of consumption of cinema that is happening today is beyond anybody's wildest imagination 25 years ago. So, with that kind of need or demand for cinema that is happening, we are in for a phenomenal ride now. Seriously, a phenomenal ride.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, sir. From a content perspective, for content makers, whether it's a director, creative people, or producers, I think this is one of the most exciting times with the convergence of all three things that we just discussed. But I think if you have to associate filmmaking as with theatrical release, then it's a difficult time. But if you make that shift in mindset that I'm making something for consumption of humans, I mean, people, be it in theater or be it on mobile, and you adapt accordingly, I think it's fabulous time.
It's actually interesting that you said that, Shobu sir, because you of course produced Bahubali, the two-part film, which was this massive tentpole film. But what's interesting is it's going to have a there's a word for it. It's not multimedia. What is the word that you're using? It has a transmedia kind of approach where it has spin-offs on there's an animation version that's already on. Please tell us.
Yeah, the Bahubali was we had the way we look at it is Bahubali is at the story and the heart is at the center, and the way we visualized it is we made films out of it. Film is not the center for us. We made films out of it. Then we had an animated series that's on Amazon Prime. That's a different branch out of it from the core of the world that we have. And we have a live action series that's on Netflix that will come up later this year. That's a different story, but from originating from the center.
There are the books, of
Then
course.
there's a books. Then there's animated. There's mobile games, and then we have been attempting at a virtual reality that's still in the works. So it revolves around that, and maybe if you make a third film, that will be a different other thing. So it's a typical hardcore tentpole franchise that we talk about. Yeah.
That's actually that's actually the focus of this discussion, the fact that language, how do you make sort of language travel and stories that are very culturally specific to their world. Bahubali is a very Indian story. It's rooted in tradition, in mythology. A film, I feel like a film like many of the films that you've made, your breakout films like Mirch Masala, films like Bhavni Bhavai, these are beautiful stories that are, again, very specific to the world they were made in. What's the trick to making them local, to kind of taking local, inherently Indian stories and you speaking a universal language?
I think Indian cinema still hasn't managed to break out to the regional uh, ghettos.
Right.
You know, the fact is, European cinema actually travels all over Europe.
Right.
In India, in spite of 70 years of independence, we haven't been able to
Even
talk to
among
each other.
each other, right,
How
right,
many
right.
Telugu films do I see?
True.
Apart from Bahubali,
Correct.
maybe very few.
Right.
Apart from film festivals, where do you see these
True.
films? Why aren't these films being dubbed across all the languages? Why aren't we taking advantage of the kind of population that India has?
Yeah.
So we have to break through this regional ghetto and manage to communicate with each other. much more intensely than we have done so far.
Yeah, completely agree. I think like even in South India, where we have each Tamil Nadu has Tamil, we have Telugu films. Tamil films don't cross over into Telugu. Telugu don't cross over into Tamil Nadu. It's just few hundred miles at at the most, because we have grown up across the generations in silos where we only appreciate or understand our very local film. And I think Bahubali could do it because of a very universal, at least Indian centric theme. And I think everybody could relate to it. But I think if we try and push, even if it's smaller films, more into other markets, and people start getting used to it, and then we'll be able to break those barriers. And I think that's the only way if Indian cinema has to survive, unless we come together and become a larger market, because we've been broken down into smaller and smaller markets, that we don't have the power of scale. Power of scale, like in China, where China has the power of scale. So if you want the scale, if you want the power of that scale to leverage that scale, we really need to break those barriers and become one.
Ketan sir, you run one of India's leading, probably the oldest animation and post production studios, Maya. You've been at the cusp of technological sort of advancements and changes. Is that an area we're going to see a lot more focus on in the years ahead?
20 years ago, one realized that technology, the way it was changing, and especially the digital technology, was going to change and lead the transformation in the audiovisual media. There was no two ways. It was the writing was on the wall, and it all started when I was doing a film called Maya Mimsa.
Right.
Crazy thing happened. There was one shot at the end of the film uh, where Maya, the protagonist, drinks a magic potion and then disappears in a flame of light.
Yes.
It's so easy to write on a piece of paper. And at that point of time, we were still doing special effects in camera
In camera, right.
or optically. I did that one shot 10 times in India and was not satisfied with it. And then I went to Hong Kong to do that one shot. And by the end of it, I was still not satisfied with it. And finally, the print went, the film was released with the climax of the film being unsatisfactory to the filmmaker himself.
Is that what inspired the?
That was the turning point in life. And I said, this is not done. We claim that we are the largest film industry in the world, that we have such a long tradition of filmmaking, and we can't even do this basic kind of digital effect that or visual effect that we want to achieve. And we have stories, and Bahubali has proven it, that you can actually do incredible stories with the new medium technologies that have come up. So that was the leap of faith, and it was actually just a bravado, sheer bravado, to say, all right, we'll jump into it. This has to happen, and so we started Maya, which is the name was also derived from that film. Yes,
right. Shobu sir, Bahubali is the farthest we've gone in terms of CGI, in terms of visual effects. And yet, and this is not, the idea is to understand why, and yet it doesn't look like what Hollywood produces on a fairly routine basis. One understands, in the short version is that we don't have the money, we don't have the budgets, and we don't have the time. But at a time when you can watch Lord of the Rings, the guy who's paying for his ticket can watch Lord of the Rings in one cinema and Bahubali in the other cinema. He doesn't care about those factors. How do we bridge that gap, if we do? And also, is that why the stories are so strong and so compelling?
Absolutely. We don't have the, like you said, rightly said, we don't have the budgets, and we don't have the experience of dealing with such vast. We can probably count on our fingers qualified, experienced VFX supervisors who can lead a film on hand. So whereas Hollywood comes with enormous experience and the money power to deliver on that. So we really need to balance. I think ultimately VFX is only a supporting, like music, like any other art form that supports storytelling. VFX is just a support structure.